If you enjoy this podcast, if you have learned anything from it, we would love for you to subscribe to it so you're notified when new episodes come out, and give us a rating on iTunes or on YouTube or whatever you are listening or watching on. And if you would share it with somebody, we would just be honored to be a part of their growth as well. All the Difference is the teaching ministry of Dr. Wayne Braudrick, the lead pastor at Frisco Bible Church. In the Bible Place series, we seek to uncover the significance of the times and locations of biblical events to help you understand and engage with the scriptures. In today's episode, we travel to Bethsaida and Cana to explore the background and culture of life in the biblical era. And it's going to be a ton of fun. But before we jump into that, I am wondering, just in terms of place and talking about place, as one of the senses is as an outsider.
Right.
So as an outsider who moved to Texas,
right. Yeah.
I have experienced in the last 8+ years, I've kind of experienced Texas in a different way than I conceptually thought of it. Right. So what would you say to an outsider about Frisco?
Okay. It's really interesting because having lived in Frisco for 33 years and seen it grow, my sense of place is very different even than the second place people who are, this is their home and they're the insiders. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny, when you stay somewhere a long time, it actually can make you better able to address things to the outsider because you feel a little bit like a third space situation yourself. You feel a little bit like an other because you've been here so long. Isn't that intriguing? So for me, what I would say, somebody's moving to Frisco, I would say take advantage of all the fun stuff, but none of that, which is wonderful, none of that's really what you're going to grow with. What you're going to grow with are some people who have made self-sacrificial choices to try and develop a home that is a place of blessing for themselves and many, many others. And that's true in so many places around the world. But it is the richest thing this place has to offer.
Yeah. And it is a good place.
It is.
Frisco has really grown on us.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways.
Like, we enjoy being here. We like being here.
No, I'm kidding.
It gets hot in the summer. That's true.
It
but it's also grown in the 8 years that we've been here.
Mm-hmm.
What used to be a field is now a neighborhood. What used to be a 2-lane road is now working on becoming a 6-lane road, and that kind of thing. And so it's been fascinating to watch it change just in the short time that we've been here. Yeah. And so I think that's fascinating in terms of, especially looking back at some of the biblical narrative, thinking that even like from one story to another, if it was 10 years, even if it was in the same location, it was a different culture. It was a different group of people.
Right.
And it's fascinating. I love it. I think it's great. So, where are we going today?
Today we are going, we're trying to work our way through the Gospel of John, hitting the places that will impact how you learn from John. So we're at the end of chapter 1, and I tell you what, I'll read the end of 1 and you can read the first part of 2. How's that? Okay. So John 1, the next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. He found Philip and told him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the hometown of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and so did the prophets, Jesus, the son of Joseph, from Nazareth." "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nathanael asked him. "Come and see," Philip answered. Then Jesus, by the way, we're not doing a literary study, but the way John encapsulates their language with these brilliant little short verb-heavy sentences, I find it hard to believe that didn't inspire Hemingway, who's kind of the poster child for short, powerful sentences. "Follow me. Come and see." Yeah. It's really brilliant writing. But that's not for today. Then Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said about him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you," Jesus answered. "Rabbi," Nathanael replied, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus responded to him, "Do you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than this." Then he said, "Truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man.
Fascinating. John 2. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding as well. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother told him, "They don't have any wine." "What has this concern of yours to do with me, woman?" Jesus asked. And that's not a derogatory term like we would think of in our culture, in our time. In their time, the term woman was actually respected.
Great respect.
Yeah.
And it was the exact opposite if you said man.
Man in our term is kind of like, hey man, kind of a positive.
Yeah.
It was more of a negative in theirs. It was kind of like a dude, negative dude, kind of not heavy, but anyway.
Not the California surfer dude.
No, that's cool.
Anyway, so yeah, go ahead.
That's interesting. Jesus asked, "My hour has not yet come. Do whatever he tells you." His mother told the servants. I love it. She just immediately flips it.
Yes.
Do whatever he tells you. Now, 6 stone water jars have been set there for Jewish purification. Each contained 20 to 30 gallons. "Fill the jars with water," Jesus told them. So they filled them to the brim. Then he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the head waiter." And they did. When the head waiter tasted the water, after it had become wine, he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He called the groom and told him, "Everyone sets out the fine wine first, and then after people are drunk, the inferior. But you've kept the fine wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana at Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, together with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they stayed there only a few days. I love this story. I know we're going to jump into something really quick, but it's. I imagine being one of the waiters, and knowing that here's for all essential purposes, it's not necessarily a toilet, but you wash your hands in there. It's for washing. This is dirty. This is grimy. Jesus just told me to fill this with water. So here's a bunch of water got from wherever, some cistern probably. It's not living water. It's just still. So who knows how gross it is. And I just filled 8 of these 20 to 30 gallon. And now he's telling me to take it out and take it to the head waiter to be drunk.
Right.
Like, I would be super nervous to give this guy some water out of this thing, and then my jaw would hit the floor. I'd be toast. I think this story is hilarious.
It is very funny.
And John has a sparkling sense of humor. We're going to see throughout John a number of really, really funny jokes. I mean, they are a scream, and this is one of the funniest. The other thing is, if you're that waiter, at that time period, you did, as best as we can tell, there were, for 7 days usually, 6 or 7, there were parties at different houses, and so you hosted the different parties. And so this is not, I don't have time to go into it, this is not the first of the parties this couple's had, but we do showers now before a wedding, they did the things after. And the head waiter is a hired guy, that this is what he does. And it's the same. You and I go. You conducted a funeral today. We do there. I'm doing a wedding next week. There are people whose job is to be the coordinators and run those things, and they have a lot of power because they hire the different servants who come along.
Contractor of the event.
So you want to make them happy.
Yeah.
So now imagining this guy, and it's not his fault. And it's not necessarily the head waiter's fault, although he's the one that's going to take the heat, as he would today. But it's the family's fault for not making sure they had enough wine for this party, and not the wedding family, the family who hosted the party for them, which we don't know who that was. There's no way to know. Wouldn't it be fun if it were Nathaniel's family? Because he's from Cana.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a fun idea, isn't it? Yeah. Whoa. This guy saved me from embarrassment as well. Anyway, we don't know that. Okay. All right, so place you'll study in Scripture. 4 spaces is the way we're going to approach it this time. Remember, we can do it 2 different ways. We can study location, locale, sense of place, or we can study, and we can do both at the same time, but that's too hard for what we're doing. On your own, you can do that, or we can do the 4 spaces. So we're going to do the 4 spaces this time. The first space is architecture or location. So what is the physical makeup of a place? And that matters. That matters when you're understanding. So if we're you mentioned Frisco earlier. If we talk about Frisco, say the Frisco Public Library, when I moved here, you're talking about a shed that had a few of us volunteers. Literally, that's what it was, a metal building. And now it is one of the largest libraries in the world, absolutely beautiful, with a T-Rex skeleton in the foyer.
Bunny ears on
It
last
was.
week.
I saw that. That was pretty awesome. Yeah, that was good. So by the way, I got some great books from the library sale.
Nice.
I cleaned
forgot
up.
to check it out.
Oh man, I got some really good. Anyway, our library has this bookstore down beneath where they take old books out of circulation, and it's a
They
deal.
are steeply discounted.
Yes, although you wouldn't like it because the good books there are all taken by us. So wherever you live, when you visit Frisco, you should avoid that. Just enjoy the T-Rex and leave the bookstore alone. Anyway, that wasn't very godly, was it? Yeah.
You
Sorry.
should check it out. You might find one or two things that are interesting.
One. You're limited to one. Okay, so let's do architectural location, first base. Let's take Bethsaida. That's the first town we had mentioned. Here's what we know. We know it was a fishing village. How do we know that? Well, the name means house of fish.
That seems self-explanatory.
Yeah, right. In Antiquities, Josephus Flavius, the Jewish Roman writer, about 40 years after this, he said, Antiquities 18:2, he says, around AD 30, he didn't use the term AD, but around that time, Philip the Tetrarch, who was one of Herod the Great's sons, he was the Roman-appointed ruler of Galilee, part of Galilee. He reworked the city of Bethsaida, says Josephus, to increase traffic, increase the number of citizens, and its overall grandeur. Okay, so we know that it's a city the Romans had invested some money into. We also know Philip, Andrew, and Peter were all from Bethsaida. After AD 30, by the way, Philip the Tetrarch renamed the city Julia because, do you know why? Emperor Tiberius's mother. Tiberius was the emperor of the world at that time, and if you want to get some good public monies coming, a nice way is to name it after the mom of the king of the world. Now, here's what we don't know, and I don't think there's any way to know at this point. We don't know how much grandeur, that's the word Josephus used, grandeur to this fishing village. I'm not sure how much grandeur you can add to a fishing village.
That's a good point.
But it may have been. We don't know where it was located. There's very fierce debate. There's a place called Et-Tel. University of Nebraska started to dig there in 1991. The director is Rami Arav, a very talented archaeologist. It's on the east bank of the Jordan, which makes some accounts in the Bible work well for Bethsaida, like Mark 6, where they had to row a long way across the sea to get there. There is significant Roman investment in Et-Tel, which just means the little hill. But anyway, that one could be. Many of us were never quite content with that. It didn't fit everything well. And then in 2016, a new dig was begun at El-Araj. El-Araj is on the north end of the Sea of Galilee. Nyack College, Kinneret College, Mordecai Ayaim is the dig director there. I don't know him, but he's got a great reputation. 2016 excavations in their very first year showed serious Roman investment, including a bathhouse. Now, in the Greco-Roman way of thinking, that is grandeur. That's much more than just having paved roads, which are great. But it's on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. That's not far from the classical era shoreline. One of the problems with Et-Tel is the classical era shoreline. Et-Tel's over a mile away from it. So that's a problem. By the way, just hypothetical here, but if you've got a group of people that you're teaching and you arrive late to the El-Araj site on the north end of the Sea of Galilee.
Like after it's closed?
Like after it's closed, okay. And
kind of...
maybe even before it's officially made a visitable site, which it is now. You know, the government, you can enter. It's just all hypothetical. But if you were to go there like that and you want your group to see it because you think this is very possibly Bethsaida, and you have them climb over a fence. Wouldn't that be ridiculous? Yeah, and
Absolutely.
and then go under some government bars that are there and kind of bend down and crawl through, and you've got 40 people crawling through this. Just if you should ever be in that situation, look out for the snakes. It turns out those basalt Roman stones, they didn't use marble there, they used basalt. And it's a beautiful black road. Actually would have hidden dirt much better. But they really absorb the sun and give off the heat more slowly during the day. So the snakes at night love...
It's very comfortable.
Right. And I just, hypothetically, you could see people wet their pants with fear.
Especially if they already feel like Indiana Jones. And then they stumble upon snakes.
Right.
Why did it have to be snakes?
Okay, I got a map to show you. I'm going to try and hold it up, and you can tell me when I get it centered. There was a really severe drought before I ever went to Israel, between 1989 and 91. And a fisherman, Mendel Nun, I should give his name, he took the time to map out the ruins of the classical harbors, the ancient harbors that are around the Sea of Galilee. And this is that cool? So this is his little map. Is that visible?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead and move that. So he has got the biggest one, Jesus' adopted hometown, is up here. That's Capernaum. And if you see all these little structures that he drew, this is not a scientifically done piece, but it was just a fisherman, and he did a great job. So you can see how important Capernaum was, right? Yeah. And Gennesareth's got a pretty nice little mole there, and Magdala, which, this is interesting. This fisherman shows Magdala as a big city, right? Yeah. When I first went to Israel, Magdala was, that's just a little nothing town. There's nothing. That's what everybody said. That was what every tour guide said. That's what all the books said. You went there.
Yeah, it's
Tell us.
Awesome. There's a fishery. They have the shops and everything uncovered. There's the first century synagogue.
Is it a small little synagogue for a tiny little
No,
town?
it's large.
It's large.
For that time, it's large.
Yes.
But yeah, Magdala...
It's not as big as Capernaum, but it's big.
Yeah.
This was not a tiny
significant,
town.
is what I would say. And actually, that's the place that when we go and we take groups there, we do... we go on a sailboat. No, not a sailboat. Yeah. We go on a boat out of Magdala.
Do you really?
Oh, that's fun.
It's fantastic.
I've never done that. I've gone out of Tiberias further down. But anyway, so these are you can see the different ones here. And Gergasa, the demoniac, was there. Yeah. Was a fairly big town, part of the Decapolis. There's a very different way of life here than over here. We'll get to that in a moment more. And it'll come up throughout John. Gadara, the Gadarenes are down there. And down here off the map, that's where the original spot we said, that was Bethsaida. And that was part of our problem with it, was you would have to go up the Jordan and then across. The other one, it says right here, Bethsaida. He wrote that in before there was ever excavation there, just because of legend. It seemed to make the most sense to him based on what the New Testament says. Again, we don't know for sure. But that's location. So first place. And if you'll notice, this is a fairly decent harbor. There's not a big town. It's not like Capernaum. But it's a fairly decent harbor. And you've stayed at what's the name of the... En-Gev, the kibbutz over there. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's one of my favorite spots.
It's awesome.
Do you know why I like it so much? At En-Gev, they have a dairy farm as part of the kibbutz. And they don't take all the cream out of the milk before they serve it in the morning. Did you know that? And that chocolate milk that you drink there, it's made on site. And it is like melted cold chocolate bars. It is so good. It's a very godly, helpful place absolutely. To be. That's but it's a pretty cool deal. All right, so that's Bethsaida. What we know, what we don't know. First base, location. Nazareth is considerably higher than the Sea of Galilee. So I just showed the Sea of Galilee. You have run around Nazareth and walked all around Nazareth. What are your observations about that place? That's mentioned here. What are your observations?
Nazareth was really interesting. Is still really interesting. It's the settlement is just on a hill, and it's got valleys around it, so it really can't expand like the livable area.
Right.
can't get much bigger. So we went to another hill that was across the valley and looked over the valley at the Settlement Hill area. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. But I have to imagine, I have to think, and I could be wrong, I'm very well maybe, but I can't imagine that space was much larger in terms of civilization in Jesus' time, or even much smaller. There were probably fewer people who lived there.
Fewer people, but they would have done more possessing of the land.
And growing things, vineyards, stuff along, whereas now the heavy agriculture is all down in the valley, which is stunning, but not up along the hills.
No.
But they would have grown along the terraced hills.
Houses.
Yep. Cana was not a large town, and that, I think, is valid. The architecture was likely similar to Nazareth, another small town, although Cana was almost certainly lower down in the valley. I say almost certainly because there are 5 possible candidates for Cana. Now, it's not a big scholarly debate like Bethsaida because they're all very close together. So it's really not that big a deal. The one I think is most likely is an Arab village called Cana, which is Arabic for ruins of Cana. It had a Roman-era synagogue, a small one. It had several mikveh that we talked about last time on the podcast. It was a major pilgrimage site starting in the 400s AD. You got to take that with a grain of salt. It could have been because somebody lied and said, this is the place. But the area was wild. It was unsettled at that time. A lot of upheaval as the Roman Empire is contracting in the 4th century. A lot of wealth to the east, a lot of struggle to the west, and this is kind of in between. And in the 5th century, when the Byzantines began to reestablish their, little did they know, in 100 years the Arabs were going to overrun them with Muhammad. But as they began to reestablish their hegemony over this area, they began to dig down at Cana. And what they found there was an original city, and they began to claim that was a spot. It's not definitive, but I find it somewhat compelling. Okay.
And it is interesting.
It is interesting, yeah. And the other spots are too, we don't know. Second space. Second space is the locale, the dominant sense of place. What's normative here? What are the government systems? So let's talk about Bethsaida. If it's El-Araj, the one up north, it had running water and sewage. Now that's huge.
That's a big deal.
So we talked about Frisco, Texas, where we sit. The first settlers who came here, which was not that long ago, 140 years ago, they didn't have public sewage for a long time. They lived on outhouses, and that was it. Now, they put water together pretty quickly. In fact, the church that you and I go to, there is an old Lebanon water company. That was what called their water company. Lebanon Water Company from the 1920s that runs, there's a 4-inch pipe from them that runs under our property.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That went out to all that. But there was no sewage. So, and by the way, that pipe's not functioning.
Certainly not. No.
Yeah, and that would not be nearly.
We've since upgraded.
We've got a 16-inch water pipe now that brings us a lot more. So when I'm reading about the history of Frisco, and I read about say 1890 in our town, I need to picture a place that had water, running water, but no sewage. That impacts how I read the old Frisco stories, right? Mm-hmm. So Bethsaida, Flavius Josephus says this is a place of grandeur. If 2,000 years ago it's named for the Queen Mother, if this is the spot, it had Roman engineering. Do you know what sewage does for lifespan?
Decimates it. It spreads disease. I mean, you look back at even cities from the Middle Ages and the sewage, and you get the Black Plague, and you get all kinds of things.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And so
you got to get rid of that stuff.
This was a pretty neat place. Second space again. What's the locale? What's the sense of space? So let's talk about fishing. Fishing is one of the oldest occupations. It is practiced everywhere on Earth, and apparently always has been. As far as I can tell, there is a rhythm to every fishing village. It's the same everywhere. You get up early. I don't know why. but you get up really early.
The fish are eating.
Yeah, I know.
night
I do know
and
why.
early in the
I just don't
morning,
like getting up at 4 in the morning. You have to deal in every fishing village I've ever been to. You have to deal. You listen to them talk about that day's catch or that day's lack of success. They have to haggle over prices in the marketplace. That's just part of the rhythm of life. I have never been to a fishing village that they didn't grumble about the effects of the government and the effects of taxation. And I'm trying to catch these fish, and they're taking all my money away every time because they're small business owners. That's what and that's the life of small business. They have complaints they have to deal with from the local people and the local government about smell. I love fish. When we go out to eat, I get fish nearly every time. Fish guts stink, though. Let's just be honest. What I like is the finished product, not the guts. One of the things that I think people will forget about, and this is part of the sense of place of Bethsaida, when you're reading about Bethsaida and where they're from, these are people who probably had a little bit different view of government. And I'm not talking about in the zealous sense of those darn Romans, that kind of thing. That was certainly, especially with Simon the Zealot, that's part of his thinking, I'm sure. But nearly every fishing village has a problem with government bureaucrats who think they know better about sustainability and how things need to be done than the fishermen themselves. If you doubt me, just call somebody in southern Louisiana and talk to a shrimp fisherman and ask him what he thinks about the Louisiana state policies for sustainable shrimp harvesting. Talk to lobstermen on the reach outside of Boston. You're going to hear the same things. Every place.
I watched a movie a long time ago. It's on Apple. It was called Coda, Child of Deaf Adult. And it was fantastically done. I don't recommend it for everybody. It definitely has some content that is not okay and some scenes that you want to fast forward through. But it's a fascinating story of a family where the parents are both deaf. And the son is deaf, but the daughter is not. And so she ends up communicating for them, doing a lot of things.
Right.
They're fishermen on the coast in New England. And so as you explain that, parts of that movie come back to me because the culture and haggling over prices and trying to get what the fish is worth and feeling like you're being taken advantage of, it's all wrapped up in this story, compounded by the fact that they have to communicate with sign language unless she's there to try to help. It's really, really well done.
Yeah.
Again, don't recommend it for anybody. Like, you can take what you want from that, but it does a great job of showing this in real life and the fact that this still happens today.
All the time.
It hasn't changed.
No. Yeah. So when you
read Bethsaida, it's not just a place. There's a sense, a location there. There's a second space. What's the dominant? And the dominant, I would find it nearly impossible to believe the dominant way of thinking there in a fishing town was not, boy, life is hard, but it's lovely, and we love what we do, but it's really difficult, and every day is a challenge. Imagine you in a lawn mowing company, and one of the things you have struggles with, you've got to bid out your work, right? Yeah. But you don't have to redo it every single day. That would be crazy. You're mowing 10 houses a day with your crew, and every one you have to go up and say, okay, what will you give me today for that work? That makes no sense, right? But that's what fishermen do. Every day they have to haggle over the guy. I don't like the look of that one. It looks like the one you bought yesterday for $5. Why are you offering me $4? And so that's part of the warp and woof of their thinking. And when we read about Andrew and Peter, we need to keep that in mind. There is one more thing I want to mention. There's a competitive brotherhood among fishermen that is fascinating. They feel a little bit like you and I did with our brothers when we were little. We wanted to beat on them, but nobody else could.
Amen.
Yeah, and fishermen compete. I got first to the spot. Those are my lobster traps. But at the same time, anybody messes. Hey, he's got trouble with his boat. Let's get over there. There's a brotherhood, and I think that's very universal among fishing. If somebody finds differently, let us know. I'd love to hear, but that seems to be everything I've read, everything I've seen. So here's the reason this is so intriguing. So Luke 5 tells us Peter owned a boat. That's a big deal. Now, it tells us Peter's likely older than the other disciples because apprentices did not own equipment. You couldn't own as an apprentice. So he is a businessman, and this isn't just a piece of equipment. This is a very expensive Have you ever owned a boat?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
My aunt, uncle had a boat. I've known a lot of people with this.
Right.
We have friends in Colorado that own a boat with another family because it's so expensive, and then they just take turns.
Yeah. Our daughter in Little Rock, she and her husband are selling their boat, and the reason is, we loved it. The boat was so fun, but it's a hole in the water that you throw money into all the time, right? And so, what did Bethsaida feel like to Peter? I think it had to feel like the sense of place had to be like it was dominated by things he left behind. Jesus said, "Follow me." He immediately dropped. He left his business, his livelihood, and he left everything. And we think of that. So if you would find Luke 5:11 and read that, and I think it helps us understand Bethsaida.
Now, Luke 5:11 says, "Then they brought their boats to land, left everything, and followed him." I think you're right. I think anytime we read that account, especially given our cultural context, and when we read the words on the page, we have this sense of young men sitting around, like we used to sit on the dock or go swim on the beach.
Now I'm going to be singing Otis Redding all day, sitting in the mall. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
But that's what we picture. But this changes that. Like for us, if that's the context, if they're sitting around hanging out to drop everything and follow Jesus, they're not dropping all that much. They're dropping recreation.
Right.
But if this is Peter's boat, this is where they live, this is their job, this is their work, this is a big deal to drop and leave that behind.
And for Peter, following a rabbi means if the others were younger, and they probably were, it wasn't as big a deal for them. But for him, it's like going back to secondary school when you're in your late 20s. I mean,
so it's also humbling.
It's humbling. You're going to follow, because the teachers were peripatetic. The rabbis collected, and the Greek philosophers did the same thing. You collected students, although unlike the Greek philosophers, Jesus doesn't charge them. Mm-hmm. Now you think of that sense of place, and we realize when we read Bethsaida, we should sit back and go, Jesus, you call me to follow you, which is such an honor and a privilege. But look at the benefit you give. I don't have to quit my job. Yeah. I don't have to. Now, you may guide me to do something else, and that's fine. Might even drag me into ministry. Anyway, but I get to follow you as part of life. These first guys didn't have that, so it's very easy to make fun of Peter. But we probably need to notice there's some good stuff. All right, last one's Nazareth and Cana. Talking about locale. Here's the most important thing about second space, general dominant thinking, right? That's what we're working on. Nazareth and Cana were part of Galilee proper. That means that they were ruled by Herod Antipas, not Philip. We mentioned Philip earlier. They were brothers, sons of Herod the Great, but they were very different. So I'm going to try to show a little map here. Will this show?
Yeah, just hold up in front of the microphone.
Okay, up in front of the mic.
That's perfect, yeah.
Okay, so if you see Perea and Eastern Galilee, or Western Galilee, that's the area that was controlled by Antipas, and not the area that was controlled by Philip. Here's why they're so different. This is Wayne's bad but brief summary. Philip seems to have wanted to have people admire him. Antipas wanted people to fear him. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Jesus does 90% of his recorded miracles and ministry in Antipas's area, not Philip's. That just seems backwards to me. Antipas is the one that had John the Baptizer beheaded. Yeah. Right? He was much more open about his ambition. He was much more ruthless. Isn't it interesting that he did most of his work? Cana, his first miracle, is in Antipas territory. Now, you have lived in, more than I have, areas of the U.S. where the government is more negative toward Christianity than where we're sitting right now. What's life like, second space, dominant way of living and thinking, what's life like for a believer in Seattle or parts of Colorado? What's it like?
When you're dealing with government or officials or people who are in charge, they are much more suspicious of motives.
Right.
They're not as likely to assume that your motives are pure, and so they're very questioning. They're very hesitant to hand things over, or even to trust you, or to invite you to come to things, to be a part of what they're doing. And secondly, I think that people culturally are more apt to mock or demean. Just, they either don't have time for you, or they don't take it seriously, and that's where you get a lot of the offhanded comments about, flying spaghetti monster and that kind of stuff, where you get made fun of for what you believe.
Yeah.
So, no, I would say those two things are probably primary. I'm sure there's a ton of other
that's good, though.
different things that other people have experienced.
Okay, sense of place. Let's talk about sense of place for Nazareth, Cana, that area. I think sense of place is really hard to grasp there because today, and we hope all of you will get to go. By the way, Jared is leading a tour that will go there in 2026. So if you're watching this, because we know this will last forever, if you're watching this after 2026, sorry, you missed it. But there'll be others. But before, you should write us and get signed up.
Yep.
When
Jeremy and I are going together. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Both Jordan and Israel.
It's pretty cool. So Muslim, Druze, Roman Catholic have got such a heavy layer of influence there, which is fine. It's really hard to get a sense of place. However, 20 years ago, they were digging a part for a new hospital on what is today Nazareth, and they discovered a lot of little houses and things that would have had more of the feel. And so the YMCA bought the area and created something they call Nazareth Village. And you've been there, haven't you? Have you been to Nazareth? Oh, so I recommend it so highly because Nazareth Village, everyone's in period costume. It's like going to Colonial Williamsburg in America. They do a very good job.
Maybe we need to add this to part of our trip in 26.
It's really nice. It's there are seasons when you're there and you can't go because it can be the Druze and the Muslims don't always get along well there, so it can be unsafe.
That makes sense.
So you have to hold it loosely. If you're on a trip and they say we're going to Nazareth Village and you don't end up going, just know that's for your safety.
We do get to experience Ketzeri, which is very similar first century dwellings, and you get put on a robe.
You do the olive press.
It's
you have the
fan.
whole thing. Yeah.
You get to cook bread.
Yep.
And it's fantastic.
So why would somebody joke? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, he's joking. Again, John loves humor, but every joke has to be based in some kind of reality, or it's not funny.
That's true.
And by the way, that's why they don't translate well over time, because the sense of place and the realities change over time. So things that were hilarious to my grandfather's generation are really clanging symbols to me. They don't mean anything.
So like when we read, can anything good come out of Nazareth? We think Jesus came out of Nazareth. So of course something good has come out. Like for us, we don't have the same idea or sense of what Nazareth was that they did.
Right.
So for us, the joke just totally misses.
It's right.
So what was he doing in the joke? And I tell you what, we're not going to do it for you, but that's what you need to do. When you're looking at a place like this, Nazareth is mentioned. So we talked about its first space, where it was. We talked about second space, its sense of place, the structures, the systems. This is a place of antipathy. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Herod Antipas is ruling over it. It's a place of difficulty. It's a hard scrabble place. Put that together and see if you can't figure out why he makes that joke. All right, third space. This is the sense of the other. All right, let's start with Nazareth this time.
Okay.
Jesus obviously experienced the sense of other. His own hometown, when he showed his deity in his own hometown, when he stopped reading the scroll of Isaiah, and it is a clear claim of godhood. They did what to him? What'd they do?
They threw him out.
And they
tried to throw him. They tried to kill him.
Yeah.
Throw him off the cliff.
that place Jared talked about where he went, and it was the expanded part of the town. It's called the Nazareth, overlooked today. It's really cool. If you have children with you, the government there, they don't have tort like we do, so there's no railings or anything. Nobody gets sued. Just keep a hand on your kids. But because I don't know, how far down is that? 400 feet? I mean,
You look straight down. It's straight down. It's a long ways.
You're not going to...
I'm not afraid of heights. It's a long ways.
I'm not either, but...
I don't want to fall off that. I mean, I don't mind the fall. It's this... Anyway, but that is probably where they tried to do that. And so Jesus knows what it's like to have the sense of the other, and that impacts us because every one of us is not made for this world the way it is. There's something in us, as C.S. Lewis said, that longs for our real home. Yeah. And that's why we seek after it, sometimes foolishly, but we seek after it, and it matters that Jesus understands that. Mm-hmm. He meets me there because he said a prophet's not without honor except in his own hometown. Bethsaida, what might it have felt like for the Jews in Bethsaida when the Roman bathhouse came in? Okay, so a Roman bathhouse, you walk in in general, there were some differences, but you walk in and there are slaves there, servants there, depending on the place. And you've been to Bet Shan with the one that's up by where the visitor center is. There's a couple of that, but that's the big one. And you go in and you go into the the anteroom and you took all your clothes off. That would not have been comfortable for many Orthodox Jews at the time.
Sure. They look different.
They do. And it's funny because people knew who was circumcised and not because of the public toilets, the sewage system. Men, you knew who, but you didn't. You weren't necessarily all naked in front of each other. So that would be uncomfortable, not necessarily against the law, but uncomfortable.
You're not walking around. If you're just using the bathroom, you're not walking around. Right. You're not sitting around. You're not enjoying the steam. You're not.
Right.
It's very quick in and out.
As Bachman Turner Overdrive sang, taking care of business. Exactly. That's not what that song's about. Anyway, so you go into this changing room, you get your stygial, this piece of wood usually that you scraped your body with. You went into the hot water. Some had the tepidarium, the warm water first, but usually it's hot water. You toasty, kind of like the spa, and like a sauna, and you scrape. You go into the water. The steam's a big deal. Underneath, by the way, it's an engineering marvel. There is a big fire and somebody working a bellows, and there's hypocaust. The floor is built up with this steam underneath, flowing in. It took us 1,900 years after the fall of the Roman Empire to develop a heated floor. You go play, like you've lived up north where sometimes people have heated floors and it's so nice. That's what this was. It was amazing. But so the steam would come up through there. They even had it such that there was a little bubble area at the beginning. You'll see a little curve on all these when you find a hypocaust. That was so the smoke didn't go in because you don't want to smell smoky. Yeah. So the smoke would go up, but the heat would go on. And they
were brilliant.
Engineering-wise, pretty cool. So you would do that. And then you go to the tepidarium or the frigidarium. One of you get warm water, cold water, closes all the pores. You've scraped all the goop off your body. You're clean. You're ready to go. Some guys were show-offs. They'd lounge in the cold water like, it's not cold to me, which is hilarious. Nothing's new. What's the biggest thing with celebrities right now?
That's like the ice baths and cold plunges. Yes. And just sounds like absolute torture to me. I can't even imagine someone enjoying being frozen.
If you had a little bit of body fat, you might enjoy it more. But anyway, and then you would dry off. Sometimes there were other activities associated with that, not in Bethsaida in Israel. That wouldn't have been a part, other nefarious activities. But so that was the bathhouse. It was a place of culture, but a morally upstanding Hebrew would probably not have participated. So when you read Bethsaida and these disciples that are from there, they also have I would imagine they have a sense of being an other in their own town. You asked about Frisco. I really miss some of the open fields. I miss the open field where I taught my kids to fly kites. And I love that things are there now, and houses are there, and people are there, and they can grow and hopefully come to Christ. But I feel a little other. Yeah. And I think that's how they would have felt. Because that bathhouse, the Romans believed in private property, as did the Hebrews, as did the Greeks. And together they built our modern law of private property. But the Romans are the ones, unlike the Hebrews, who allowed the government to take over private property if there was something better going to be put there. 2003, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that that would be the way Americans would do it too. And now you can have your land condemned if something better is there. We have a huge football stadium in a town further over that they just took over people's land because there was something more beneficial.
Something that would bring in more money.
Right. But to a Hebrew, the law of private property is inviolable. And that would be very offensive, very other to them. By the way, I kind of find it offensive too. But anyway, all right, Cana, third space, Cana. Nathaniel, one of the 12 disciples, we know was from Cana. So given the pressure of Antipas's reign, this distinction of being selected by Jesus, I think he must have stood out to a fairly uncomfortable degree. So I would just suggest this. When you see Nathaniel's name in Scripture, I think we should think what it was like for him to be a committed follower of Jesus from Cana, a pretty hard place. All right, fourth space. That's the future space. So Nazareth, biggest thing to understand about Nazareth is what you already said. It's the best known town throughout human history because for 2,000 years, people have described the most famous person ever as Jesus of Nazareth. So that's the future. Bethsaida, Matthew 11, really grim prediction regarding the future of Bethsaida when Jesus returned, since he taught there. You want to have you got it? Matthew 11:20?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Then he proceeded to denounce the towns where most of his miracles were done because they did not repent. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the miracles that were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented in sackcloth and ashes long ago. But I tell you, it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon on the day of judgment than for you. That is some harsh criticism.
Boy,
and we still don't know where Bethsaida actually is.
Right. But we thought the snakes were bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hypothetically. Now, of course, not everyone in Bethsaida rejected Jesus. This is not a universal curse. The context makes that clear, actually. The reality is those who reject Messiah Jesus will be judged. In fact, if you don't know the good news of Jesus Christ, He is God the Son. He is Messiah. He proved that. He proved his deity, and he became human so he could die for you and for me and raise from the grave. You see, our sin separates us from God, and it's just logical. I mean, there's no such thing as a little bit in a cup. It either got something in it or it doesn't, right? Right now I've got delicious tea in this cup, wedding breakfast tea from London. So good. But if I want to say this cup is clean, I can't. Oh, well, it's mostly clean. No, it's not. It's either clean or it's got stuff in it. It's dirty. You have sinned, so have I. We are unclean. And God's holy. He can't just pretend that we're not clean. So he, loving us, made a way where Messiah the Son, God the Son, died because his blood is so precious. It's the only thing that could pay the price and remove all of our sin. The sin debt is paid, and he rose from the grave, so if you trust him, you follow him in everlasting life. This kind of judgment doesn't apply to you. Amen?
Amen.
If you would like to talk more about the gospel of Jesus Christ or any of the stuff in here, where do they write? Go to All the Difference?
Yeah. Go to allthedifference.us, and we've got a form on there where they can send in questions or communicate with us through there.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take on the next places mentioned in John next time.
Yeah, absolutely. That is super fun and super cool to think through those places in more than just location.
Right.
And in terms of culture and in terms of the people who lived there and what they were experiencing at the time. And I think it really does help the Bible come to life.
Amen.
That's our goal. Thanks, everybody.